Hello and welcome to another March to a Million podcast with your host, Greg DuPont. Today, we're going to do some super cool, super fun stuff because, well, first off, we're going to be talking about Greg's new book. Now, we're also going to be talking about a lot of other things. So we're going to start with the book as our foundation, but this is really meant to be somewhat of a mini series on training. Like, we're going to be showing you a lot more about the processes and why WSN and why Greg did it all, because I think as this continues to develop, it's going to be more and more important for us to go ahead and do that. So Greg, welcome to the show.
Hello, Matt. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm really excited because you held up something that I want the audience to see right away. So why don't you hold it up for those watching? Guess what? The book is here, March to a Million.
Hey, I'm so excited about this book, Matt. This is it's called my magnum opus, but that means I've got nothing else to give, and then I do. But you know, my team and I have produced a lot in the last year. All of it built towards making things easier for the mission, and you know, we did the retirement tax trap, we did the probate tax trap, we did the long-term care tax trap. You know, those books that were short and focused on problems. Mm-hmm. What I love about this book is this is focused on stories, people that we've come upon throughout the course of our journey, and bringing examples to people of the changes that we made, and bringing examples for members of WSN, the change that they can bring to other people. And I felt that this is kind of a good time as we were going through this mini series stuff we're doing. This was a good time for us to kind of pull it all together and kind of give the cohesive view again of where we are and what we're doing. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit here today.
Well, you do open the book with a dramatic moment. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I don't talk about this a lot, but as I was working through this with my team, felt that this was something that was important to share. And that is that, I was what they called a blue baby when I was born. And I was, administered my baptism at the hospital because my mom and dad didn't think I'd make it home. And that was just something that resided in the back of my mind for, just a story until I was doing some leadership training. And they asked, and the guy that was leading the conversation, what are some major milestones in your life? And the easy ones were, well, I got married, I had my daughter and all this kind of stuff. And then it just dawned on me that I almost never had this life. And as they prompted me a little bit more, that's what really led to the March to a Million. Why was I spared? Why did I make it when other babies in that situation did make it? And so that's the core of the March to a Million. When I made that realization that, at least that's the messaging I took away from it, that I'm here for a reason. And this is the mission.
Well, let's talk about the foundation of what you've been building with March to a Million, right? So you're an attorney, but you built something that's way more integrated. So you've integrated tax, legal, investment, and insurance. Why is that so important?
It's about control. What I saw in the first 1/3 of my professional career where families did not have that coordination between their lawyers, their financial advisors, and all that stuff. That lack of information back then, now we got too much information, but it is lack of control for the family and their life savings. And so, that traditional model is broken, where we have the financial advisor and the insurance guy, and it's only getting worse. And so that has led me to this goal, this multidisciplinary goal, where my goal is to, essentially change the model going forward. If you think about it, you and I, our financial advisory world that we've come from, it's this AUM model that, I do better when you do better, and that bull that's out there, right? And it's broken, as we've talked about many times. And this is a recurring theme as we've chatted through these podcasts, but I'm going to keep singing the song until it becomes the standard, that this AUM model and this disjointed level of guidance is leading this generation, the 401k generation, directly into financial ruin that doesn't have to happen. And You and I've talked about this before, but I think it's directly reflected in our approach trying to fix this with not using AUM as our model, assets under management, rather wealth under alignment. And the fact that how do we make sure that as true fiduciaries, we're handling everything. And so that's the game we're trying to play, bring all those things together as strategists for people. And this is the role that, again, the attorneys in WSN and the advisors that will bring into WSN eventually are being taught that this is the approach that benefits the client the most, that holistic model that doesn't come from any of the silos that have been what has been the cornerstone of this industry.
And one of the silos that a lot of people don't talk about is risk, right? They always think that risk is just about market crashes or somebody dying, right? But danger is really something else that the investors really need to pay attention to. So what are the biggest mistakes you see when families have built a substantial IRA or a 401k over, like, let's say 20, 30 years?
The real danger is fragmentation. When people have no cohesive plan around their assets and one person dies. I see this all the time. I've seen families lose hundreds of thousands of dollars because there was one person that was in charge of the finances. And sometimes they even kept things secret. That happens more often than not. Or they're just not getting an overview. The classic example from our business, Matt, is, the RMD and a 401k RMD and an IRA 401k RMD. That those are two different requirements. It's that fragmentation. It's when people are not following the beneficiary designations, when people have not changed those. Again, this is the situation I've seen over and over and over in my probate side of our practice over the years is, spouse dies. And surviving spouse, well, is starting to get the paychecks from the 401k, but they never go in and get the beneficiaries changed. So next thing, when that second spouse dies, then that ends up in probate. And as we've talked about before, hello, 6% fees. And so it's that type of fragmentation. It's, not being able to understand what happens when this IRA has to be used to pay for long-term care expenses during a down market. If when you have $150,000 coming out of your savings every year to take care of that, that's going to take away decades in years.
Speaking of fragmentation takes on an even wider and a broader sort of scope here. So the ultra wealthy, right? The ultra high net worth, they have what's called a family office, but most people don't have access to CPAs, attorneys, financial advisors, all working together. And that's something that you believe is necessary, yes?
Life has become so complicated without us even realizing it. Again, when I started practicing law, it was fairly black and white about taxes on an estate. You either had an estate over $600 and some $1,000, and we had federal state tax kicked in, or you didn't. And then as the 401k generation evolved, now we have this complexity of, okay, do we have an estate tax? Well, most people don't, except for the ultra wealthy. But what they're doing is ignoring the underlying income tax elements of things. And this is something that's during a lifetime and beyond. And so what does that mean? That means they need to have tax guidance. And are they getting that? And the answer is, for many of them, absolutely not. They're TurboTax for the returns. And if they do have a CPA or an enrolled agent, then it's getting done, the return, from a historical perspective, but no one's doing proactive tax planning. And so when you think about what the ultra wealthy have benefited from this office, is a coordination of the management of their assets, whether they are real estate assets, or they are 401k assets, or they are IRA assets, or they are brokerage account assets. and tax management of those things so that people have the ability to minimize lifetime taxes. And when they have businesses involved, and that becomes even more complex. When you talk about somebody I see this profile quite a bit, there's somebody that has built themselves a real estate portfolio and they've done good, and they're now generating reliable income off of it. They've had the benefits of tax depreciation on some of these things, and some of them have grown big enough that they've got estate tax issues on them that they're out there. So what do? Because a lot of times, again, it's that spousal type situation where one spouse really enjoyed the challenge of building that, and they built a good portfolio of it. And the second spouse wants nothing to do with running that when that person has passed away. So how do we convert that asset in a appropriate way to income, to wealth to be transferred? And how do we take care of Uncle Sam when he comes in and wants to take a big chunk of that, and we don't have any liquidity to take care of it? And so that's what the family office does for ultra high net worth. And that's what our team can do for people that are a little shy of ultra high net worth.
Well, let's dive into some of the other major eroding factors, right? And so one of the other ones is you're going to need 3 to 5 years of $150,000 plus a year care, right? How does the WSN system address health concerns and the longevity paradox that we seem to be in now?
The mission is to make longevity a blessing and not a curse. Okay. And when we start thinking about it, start talking about it, there are tools out there that allow leverage. There are structures. And that's where the combination of law and finance and insurance really is the strongest, because we can combine estate planning structures along with some of these leverage tools to be able to provide a reasonable basis to pay this stuff up to the amount that the family has chosen. And getting back to our earlier comments, it's all about control. How much do we want to expend in that mission of keeping us in some type of secure environment? I hear this all the time. Greg, hey, as long as I am cognizant of where I am, I want to be able to afford the place that's going to treat me the best. But when the system is going to keep me alive and I don't really know what's upside and down, then I want my family to be in control of that bleeding, to be able to stop that, because I've been a good steward of my money to this point in time. And I want to allow my kids, my grandkids, to benefit from this, and not the nurses and aides at the long-term care facilities. Mm. And that's really what the core of the 40 estate plan is all about, isn't it?
Well, so let's do kind of worst case scenario here. So you just addressed a bunch of different concerns that you talk about, not only in your new book, but also through the WSN system. What happens when all of these things, and now this happens more often than I think our listeners know, that these things actually are unaddressed and then they just start compounding on each other? What can happen?
Well, a lifetime of work and saving can disappear in a blink of an eye. We've seen it. It's just let's take an example. Mm-hmm. We've seen people come in with $2-3 million that think that they have everything buttoned up. And once we start asking them, peel back the layers of that onion, they realize, okay, so both of us, husband and wife, have family histories of care. And one of my turning points on this was when I couldn't find the way to get through to the spouse, the man, the situation. That this is a real concern. You have a family history, you have a personal history. We should be doing something about this. He was in his 50s at the time, didn't want to address it. Lo and behold, a couple of years later, early stage Alzheimer's. And When you get it early, that's when we have the longest run of it. And so you're there, that family was set up to lose, well, $10,000 a month. And that ultimate journey was about 6 years for them. And so it's huge when it hits. And if we can do some things, some prudent things to, well, determine where we are and then deliver a plan to get us out of it.
Okay, let's jump into the plan, right? So, we've got all of these pitfalls, all of these issues, and you've created a proprietary process to address a lot of these. Let's talk about the 4D estate plan.
So as we've talked about before, the 4Ds, we're going to document things the right way. We're going to build the right structures. We're going to defend our estate plan by funding those structures the right way. And to do this, first, we're going to determine where we are. And then we're going to deliver this plan. So we go back to, any of the main risks that we follow, right? What are the risks in retirement? Well, there's longevity, there's market risk, there's liquidity, there's taxes, there's long-term care. Each one of these are easily defined risks that anybody that you're sitting and having an estate planning conversation with, it's got one of these in the back of their mind. And once we find out which one is their concern they want to deal with, that helps us decide what the pathway forward for them. And with our 4D program, we help them determine where they are so they can see the implications of where that is and then design that pathway forward, as opposed to coming into a conversation from, I'm a long-term care insurance salesman, I'm going to sell long-term care insurance. Or I'm an asset under management guy, I'm going to sell assets under management. Or I'm an annuity guy, I'm going to sell annuity guys. Or I'm an attorney and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sell you a trust. They all work together. And it's once you get that cornerstone of understanding through the clarity map process, they get that clarity. And then they say, okay, now that I see right now, if my history is the same as my parents' history, we got $500,000 of risk. And I would rather that go to my kids. How do we plan for that? Well, we can carve a little bit of this out. We can build this structure over here. We can set your income so that it is never going to outrun your life. And how's that plan feel to you? Feels pretty good. Let's do it.
Speaking of feeling really good, people, when they have amassed a substantial amount of money, they think they're good to go, because they're super smart and they were able to be wildly successful. But what happens when there are discovered major gaps through this 4D process? Tell us a story about that.
I was working with a gentleman, it was about a year or so ago, and he had everything under control. He built his savings mostly by using index funds and things like that. And I share with him, if I would have put, some money in the S&P 500 back in 1983, and I woke up this year, there was a 3,000% rate of return on that. You're not a rocket scientist because you got lucky doing it that way. And then when we started talking through the tools, because, each tool has different properties and those properties solve problems. And so we dug a little deeper, trying to get to the truth of his situation. And he said, yeah, I am concerned about long-term care, but there's nothing I can do about it. And long-term care insurance is expensive. Well, let's talk about that. Are you familiar with sequence of return risk? And well, not really. So I walked through the implications of having all of his assets in the stock market and what happens if he needs money when it's a down market. And now he started to see, I never thought about that. That's something that you've opened my eyes on that one. Okay, well, we talk a little bit more, and he's, well, okay, I've got all this money out here and we got taxes. And I started talking about, Well, Roth conversion, it's too much. I don't want to write those tax checks. I got you. But how about if we approach it from this perspective? Your plan right now is to keep deferring that, let it grow. How about, we know we got RMDs, right? Yeah. How about if we start taking now instead? You're still healthy, right? Yeah. How about if we start taking them now, and instead of consuming that because you don't need that money, how about if we buy a little bit of an insurance policy that will pay Uncle Sam so that your wife can convert that down the road? Oh, well, it makes sense. So it's these things, people that, you know, I try not to beat people upside the head. Sometimes I have to, and the reality is, I've been doing this for, going on 20 years now, on top of my law practice. And I still learn things. We still have guests on here that teach me things. And unless this is your full-time gig, and even that, there are a lot, I know a lot more than a lot of guys in this industry. And I'm reminded of every time I sit down with a cup of coffee with some friends of mine that just we're just at a different level. And that's okay. Each of us fills our role. But unless you've been there, you experienced it, you've seen the stories, and that's one of the things that I'm so excited about the March to a Million book, is it's the stories that bring it to life for people, that things like this happen. And once you see it, once you've experienced it, then it becomes ingrained in you. And if you're like me, wired to be a lifetime learner and a quick start, then you're going to jump right in and you're going to find solutions for it.
I want to dive into that just a little bit more deeply, right? So since you have been doing this for 20 plus years, right? What is the most expensive mistake you've seen where if they would have gone through the 4D process, they probably could have saved 6 or 7 figures?
A very easy one comes off the top of my head right now, because it's an estate that we're dealing with that person died without a will, and $1 million in IRA money payable to the estate, which means immediate income taxation, which means probate on it. So that $1 million estate has been eaten up by in excess of $400,000.
Oh, gosh.
Simply because the person didn't think it would happen to them. They had no will, let alone trust or anything like that. They had no family, so they didn't really care that much about it. But the process still needs to go forward. And there's so many other places that money could have gone to good use. And I've seen those over and over again. And now on the other end of the equation, the bigger ticket problems are, we do see people now that are in excess of the estate tax exemption. As high as it is, the estate taxes are even higher. And especially when you blend in some, you got IRA money in there as well as real estate holdings and all this stuff. It's not unusual to see a portfolio of real estate that has been acquired and built for the lifetime needs to be dismantled to satisfy Uncle Sam, to make distributions to maybe one recalcitrant child. All of those can be fixed and prevented by following a defined process like the 4D estate plan.
So even, obviously you've given a couple examples. When you have more wealth, there are more situations, more potential complications. And if you don't have a bunch of people working together, then some of those things can fall through the cracks. But I want to switch gears just a little bit here. And I'm going to ask you a tough question. I can say I've never asked you this question before. When is it too late to implement strategies like some of the stuff that you talk about in 4D, whether it's Roth conversions or estate advanced trust planning?
It's never too late until you die.
Okay, so there's the drop. That's it, huh?
Or no longer have the capacity to do it. There are always things that can be done. However, our options and our tools get reduced with each passing year, as it were, right? What was a reasonable investment in long-term care insurance in our 50s becomes prohibitively expensive in our 70s. What was a reasonable investment in a high value cash value policy in our 50s and 60s, prohibitively expensive in the 70s. What was a tax bill that could have been mitigated by a gifting program throughout several years instead is a estate tax time bomb. So it's never too late, but it's never too early either.
Why do people need to do this now? I mean, so, you've got clients listen to this, you've got attorneys listen to this, you've got prospective clients who listen to this, you've also got advisors listen to this. Why is it so important for them to start that 4D process today?
So most of the people that we talk to, that we work with, are in what I call the tax-free retirement window. There's this window of opportunity between, call it 55 and 73, that subtle changes that are made during that period of time, strategic changes that are made during that period of time, many of them uncovered through the 4D process, that can not only reduce the tax impact, but amplify the effect, the legacy. And it's done, again, not too early, not too late, but there is that window there that is kind of optimum, where we can make these subtle shifts, where we can look at some strategies that most people haven't thought about. No matter how much they've watched YouTube, no matter how many free dinners they've gone to, they have not really thought about the way that it impacts their situation and how they're going to work through it.
So 73 happens. I mean, is this like a door that just slams shut or what?
It's not a door that slams shut, but there are a lot of things that get taken off the table. So if we have a significant RMD, which is what 73 represents, right? If we want to take and do Roth conversions on top of that, well, it has to be done on top of that. So if you have an RMD of $25,000 and you want to convert $25,000, it has to go on top of that. So that's $50,000 of taxable income to convert 25. Whereas if you change your paradigm, your way of thinking, and realize, hey, I'm going to be forced to take this out down the road, and it's going to be pushing me in these brackets down the road. Maybe I should start doing it earlier. Maybe I should start doing conversions or just putting in different brokerage accounts or whatever, so that I can get time value money on my side and on my family side, as opposed to continuing to be on Uncle Sam's side, where it's just growing the amount that you have to pay him.
Clarity. One of the things that we talk about all the time on all of these episodes is helping not just the provider, the expert, you guys, having clarity, but also the clarity for their clients. As we wrap up today's show, do you want to talk a little bit about that? And then, of course, we've got to plug the book, dude. We haven't even plugged the book yet. Like, where can people get the book? Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, but let's talk a little bit about the level of clarity that happens when you become a WSN member.
So first of all, once you become a WSN member, you recognize that you have access to the tools to fully assess a client situation. And the technology is such, as we've talked about on this show before, that you don't need, as a WSN affiliated attorney, advisor, whatever, to have my years of experience. You have the benefit of my years of experience, but the tools do so much of the work for you now that never has been available before. It can make you look like a genius very quickly. I'm not a genius, but my tools are, right? And that's what we're able to do. Just we now need to know what items to seek clarity on. And that's easy with our training. What do we need to look at? Well, we need to look at what's the tax impact of where we are and how our assets are positioned. And what's long-term care, all those kind of things we've talked about here and elsewhere that I talk about in the book. Okay. These are questions that some of them are nascent in the mind of the client. Some of them have not even been on their radar or whatever. So you can help them get that clarity by knowing these are the issues that they need to be looking at and asking them more questions. And that's what this is all about. right? Going back to our first conversations about WSN, and it's, just asking more questions, finding the truth of their situation. The whole core of what we've been talking about the last several episodes with the trust-based conversations, helping them determine what their issues are, and then knowing that with a few strokes of a keyboard, our team can provide that clarity for them and for the advisor talking about it.
So as we tee up the book here, because I definitely want you to talk a little bit about that, but can you remind everybody what the mission is of March to $1 Million?
So the book, March to $1 Million, available on Amazon. And if you want to get a copy directly from me, reach out to me. We'll talk about it. www.joinwsn.com, or find me on LinkedIn. But the mission, the challenge, going back to our beginning of our conversation, when it has struck me that I was here for a reason, and that's what I've converted into the March, which is initially it was positively impact. That's gone. It's now to save 1 million families, or to impact 1 million families and save over $200 billion of unnecessary tax, waste, market loss, and such. When you start doing the math on that, it can be done. I got 5 more years to do it. That's part of the reason why we've been prolific about our output here, because we want to have that cascading effect. We want to have other advisors understand that these issues are out there. They can be reduced, they can be fixed, and they can impact families. That's what this is all about.
Well, listen, everybody, if you're a WSN member right now, this episode is a perfect case study. There's all sorts of language, phrasing that Greg has used so that it can help you really internalize what's being talked about and how you can present these ideas to clients and prospects. And if you're not a member of WSN, I don't know what the heck you're waiting for, but go to wealthsolutionsnetwork.com or joinwsn.com to explore how this system can empower your practice and really protect a lot more families and help Greg achieve this idea of March to $1 Million. Greg, closing ideas, thoughts?
Grab yourself a copy of March to $1 Million. Read through it, see the stories, see the families, and know that you can do that you can have this impact on those families. People, many of them you're seeing every day. These are people that just came through our network in the last few years. So you can positively impact people simply by learning a little bit more about what you're doing and changing our paradigm as estate planning attorneys.
Well, if you have not subscribed to the show, make sure that you do that yet. And if you know an estate planning attorney or a financial advisor or a client who really needs to hear this information, please make sure you share this podcast with them. So for Greg and me, Matt Halloran, we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.